Hey guys, welcome back to the Banter Bets and BPL podcast. Just Liam here today. Going to do a quick little waiver wire fantasy BPL episode, just to kind of give a little update. I know it's been a while since last week's games, but we also got to consider the midweek games. So it might be nice to talk about waivers now with the waiver deadline tomorrow. So I'll just run through those games quick. If you didn't check out our betting episode last night with our panel of betting experts, Brother Keegs, Sandy, Marco, and then our guest Cody. Make sure to check that one out. And Marco's up $71 in 2 weeks, guys. So if you want to go win some free money, then make sure you hit up Marco's picks, and check out the rest of ours while we're there too. I think Marco's not the only one who's in the green over 2 weeks. But anyways, let's get right into it with the weekend recap. Last weekend in the Prem. So starting off with Everton, 5-2 over West Brom. Lots of goals all weekend, guys. So probably a good weekend for most of your fantasy teams. I know it was for mine, with so many goals flying in. Obviously, the Everton attack looks great. There's only like the three players, the front three look really great, and they're definitely worth owning. And congrats if you drafted them, because I wasn't super high on James at least, but he looks good. But yeah, James Rodriguez, Richarlison, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, all guys you want to own. I don't think any of their midfield three should be owned, because they're kind of the workers. They get the ball to those guys and let them do their thing. But definitely own the front three, and maybe just keep an eye. Maybe if they started playing, I don't know why they do this, but if they started playing a more attacking player in that midfield, then that might be like a Sigurdsson, or I don't know, a Bernard, or anyone in that attack, I think would look pretty good. So maybe just keep an eye out, or in case of injuries, because I think that is an attack you want to be a part of this year. Last week I said incorrectly that I think Yerry Mina would lose his spot soon. I don't think he will. I think he's going to be a starter for this foreseeable future, because it looks like Mason Holgate, who I think is a better player, and I think they think is a better player, but he's just injured right now and he's out for a while. So they're 2-0. So I don't see why they would, 6 points. I don't see why they would change anything up too much. So they'll probably stick with Mina. Whether they keep clean sheets a lot, I don't know. They seem to be a little bit gung ho. But Mina might be a starter you can roster for the next month or two. On the West Brom side, not much that's new, guys. Like Mateus Pereira scored an awesome free kick. He's probably already owned. If he's somehow not owned in your league, go grab him. He looks like their best player. Grady Diangana also scored a nice goal. He's probably a pickup. He looks pretty good. I don't really know if you want to be depending on West Brom to score every week and for it to be Diangana, but he's a good. I think he's a solid fifth midfielder. Don't be expecting him to be pulling up any trees. They started Callum Robinson up front. Is he listed? I don't know if he's listed as a midfielder or a forward. I should probably know that. Either way, he's not rosterable. So it doesn't really matter if he's a midfielder or forward. He's not rosterable as either, because he doesn't score goals. He doesn't play the whole game. He did the same thing for Sheffield last year, so no interest in him whatsoever. Another 7-goal thriller, Leeds 4-3 over Fulham. We said it last week, guys. This Leeds attack is legit. I hope you got a piece of them. I missed out on waivers on Click and Helder Costa, which is unfortunate. If you got a piece of those guys, or if you drafted Bamford late, nice. Bamford is better than Rodrigo. We knew this was going to happen. He trusts Bamford. He brought in Rodrigo for big money, but like this is Bamford's team still. This is he's the striker that's going to play and going to score. And kudos to you if you knew that and you drafted him. I am wishing that I did that right now. And then obviously Jack Harrison, he's the other part of that attack that you want. It was kind of cool to see Click on penalties, because I thought he would be maybe the least valuable out of those ones, or the least coveted at least. And but if he's on penalties, that's huge and especially the amount of penalties that are being given away in the Premier League, with this stupid 1 foot away from guy kick it at his hand and his hand's out from his body, so it's a penalty. There's going to be a lot of penalties this year, so penalty takers are good to own. Mitrovic started for Fulham. I don't know why he didn't start the first week. Must not have been fit. Scored. No surprise there. this guy scores Premier League goals, so he's the guy to own. Bobby Reed also scored, and he did score in midweek too. Traditionally not much of a goal scorer. So I don't know if you're desperate for a third forward, then Bobby Reed could, if you have absolute crap on your bench, then maybe go grab Bobby Reed. But again, not a guy you want to be depending on every week. So he's probably a third striker on the bench, can play in a pinch if you need. Man United, embarrassed at home, lost 1-3 to Crystal Palace. Zaha looked really good. We knew he was going to look good in this game because he always brings it against Man United. He's got a point to prove against them, even though he wasn't good enough to play for Man United, and that's why he didn't play for Man United. But he's got that chip on his shoulder, and every time he plays us, he destroys us. So good for you, Wolf. And then he takes the next few games off. Maybe that's different this year, but I honestly feel that's how it is with him, especially with the transfer window closing. Now that he's probably won't get his move, he's not going to be motivated again, and I think that's a bit of a problem. I'm not a fan of his mindset, but he is playing up front. He's a midfielder playing up front, so there's obviously fantasy value there. I think he's got more fantasy value than actual real life value as a player who's not really a winner. He could be help you win your fantasy league this year. So not super high on him, especially with motivation, but we'll see. Not a bad third midfielder, second midfielder own, in all honesty. Man United attackers were quiet. They started Dan James. Dan James is a zero, like we said last night. He's almost a negative on offense, actually, because he can't do anything with the ball. Seems like a great guy, but great guys don't win you fantasy games. You obviously don't want Dan James. They don't win you real life games either. So that was unfortunate that they started him. Greenwood should be back. He scored midweek. He should start. I like Greenwood. The only thing is if they do bring in Sancho, Greenwood is going to take a massive hit, obviously. The way their board gets transfers done, I don't think there is a chance they bring in Sancho. But well, it's not that I don't think there's a chance. I think there's a small chance, but I still think it could happen. Maybe they get their butts in gear towards the end of the window. In the meantime, Greenwood's a goal scorer, guys. We know that. You want him, you want Rashford, you want Martial. This game doesn't change who you want. Pogba looked not very good again, but they're always going to keep playing him. So Van de Beek owners, be patient. I'm a Van de Beek owner. I think he's good. I think he should be playing. Whether they actually play him or not remains to be seen. He came off the bench and scored. He started and played most of the League Cup game this week, so that tends to, you tend to think that that's not a great sign if he's going to start this weekend, but I don't know. Hopefully he does. I wouldn't be too panicking about him yet, because after all, he did score. He's scored 1 goal in 13 minutes of Premier League soccer, so and it's not like they've got the deepest midfield or deepest attack around, so I think he's still got value for the season. Townsend producing points 2 weeks in a row. Andros Townsend is putting up fantasy points. I wouldn't be buying on this. Maybe ride him while he's hot, but don't be counting on Townsend as a guy that's going to be, putting up fantasy points every week. He's pretty defensive. He's a hard worker. He's kind of the opposite of Zaha. In reality, he's a hardworking blue collar player. I don't think he's a great fantasy asset though, unlike Zaha. If you want to sell high on him, if you can get a trade for him for, I don't know, pretty much anyone, I think he's going to be waiver wire for the rest of the year. If you want to use him as a trade piece right now, do it. Ayew misses a pen, which kind of sucks because we were big on him as the Crystal Palace striker. He missed the pen. It was retaken and Zaha scored. So that's another point for Zaha. It sucks that Ayew missed it because if he scored it, that would have been, like we said, lots of pens this year. It would have been nice for him to have, and it would have definitely, I think, cemented him as I still think he's the number 1 forward to own on that team, but it's a bit of a pain in the butt. I still like Ayu over Batshuayi, over Benteke, over any other forward on that team. Aaron Wan-Bissaka did not play. He should be playing because he's a good defender. Not that I don't like Timothy Fosu-Mensah, but Wan-Bissaka, we paid big money for him. He's a good defender. He got tormented a bit by Palace last year. Maybe that's why he got left out. But he's obviously going to be playing this year. If you want to, if you got an impatient owner in your league who has Wan-Bissaka, throw him an offer this week. Offer him, like, I don't know, a defender that scored like Konza or something like that. A James Justin or someone who's started off really hot. Although I think James Justin could have some value, actually. We'll talk about that later. But, offer them like a defender who scored in the first 2 weeks and see what they say. Say, hey, they're not playing this guy. Wan-Bissaka, he's out, and try and buy him low. See if anyone will bite on that. Probably not. Arsenal 2-1 over West Ham. Lacazette at it again. Front three look good. Lacazette, Aubameyang, Saka, Willian. All these guys look good. Saka's a bit, I don't know about Saka as I think he's definitely someone you own, not someone you can trust on totally, just because he plays a little farther back. But absolutely love him as a player and as a prospect. But yeah, Lacazette, Aubameyang, Willian, looks like they're scoring goals. Looked like those are going to be, like, we were a little bit hesitant on who's going to be starting for them up front. Looks like it's going to be those three. So it's those three. Those are the guys you want to own. So good for you if you got them. I do think Nketiah still has value. He came off the bench, scored, saved the day, somehow got 3 bonus, even though he played like 15 minutes max. I think he looks good. I think he can be the first man off the bench, starting every once in a while. I think he's a solid third forward to own on your fantasy team. Mikel Antonio, the guy scores goals, man. And I will not be taking any Antonio slander, okay? This guy is the real deal. People don't think he's, like, how much do you want to see, guys? He's their forward. He scores goals. He may not be the most skilled player ever, but he's an effective Premier League forward who should be respected at this point. Maybe I'm really biased towards him because I've had him in fantasy forever, but there's a reason I have him in fantasy, and I've had him forever because he makes stuff happen out there. And he's a little different from other strikers, but he gets the job done. And he's a guy I want on my team all day. Ainsley Maitland-Niles dropped out, just to go back to Arsenal. That's a little bit disappointing because I really liked him as if you drafted him, I thought that was a really great pick. He looked really good in the Community Shield. Played last week, gets forward. I thought he could have some sneaky value. So it was a little disappointing to see him not play this week. I wouldn't be panicking too much, though, just because of that upside that he offers. The only other West Ham players you want outside Antonio, I think, are Bowen and Souček. Those are the only other two that I actually think give a care about winning football matches for that team. And they're the only ones that actually have quality. Souček is, I love watching this guy. People say he's a defensive mid. He's not a defensive mid. This guy gets forward. He absolutely loves scoring headers, which you just love to see it from guys. So I think rostering Souček and Bowen as midfielders is smart. No one else. Don't get sucked in by the Felipe Andersons, the Lanzinis, the guys who are not going to perform. Maybe they'll give you one good game in every 12. Don't get sucked in by those guys. Go with steady, reliable guys like Antonio, Bowen, Souček. You obviously don't want to be rostering any West Ham defenders whatsoever under any circumstances. They have horrible fixtures. They're a horrible defensive team. And you can't even stream them right now because their games are bad. So don't be doing that. Brighton 3, Newcastle 0. Tariq Lamptey is awesome. Good for you if you picked him up off waivers. Better for you if you drafted him. I don't usually condone owning, mid to low table Premier League defenders, but this guy is getting forward. He's attacking. He's not he's a great defender, but he's also great at getting forward. He's absolutely everywhere on the pitch. So he's someone that I feel good about owning for the whole year. He's not losing that spot. He's not going to stop attacking. So that's a really nice find if you've got him. If he's on a waiver wire, run to the waiver wire and get him. Looks like up front, Mopai and Trossard are the guys to own. I've loved Trossard for the whole time he's been in the Prem now. He's so swaggy. He's creative. He makes stuff happen. He scores goals, he assists goals. He's a fun midfielder to own as a midfielder, your third or even second best midfielder at a push. I think he's got some real value there. Connolly is an interesting one. Aaron Connolly, if he's playing regularly and is a part of that attack, which looks pretty good and has good players, like we've just listed the 3 good players, then he's definitely ownable as a forward, as your forward number 3. If he's playing, if anyone's playing, then he's as a forward, then they're worth owning. So if he's playing, he's definitely worth owning. It's really that simple with forwards when you're in a 4-team, a 12-team, 14-team, 12-team league, anything like that. So keep an eye on him for sure. Definitely worth a pickup, just to maybe he keeps his spot. Leicester 4-2 Burnley. Jeez, we had a lot of goals this weekend, guys. James Maddison didn't start again. I said not to worry last weekend. I still wouldn't be dropping him by any means. And you don't want to trade him either because his value is at an all-time low. I'd be worried a little bit now because Pratt scored, who's the guy who's playing over him. Surely, I really don't think they're just like, oh, Maddison, yeah, you're out now. We're not playing you. Like, I don't think there's any way that that's the case for the rest of the season. He's got to find his way back in soon. But, he probably belongs to be benched for a couple weeks until he starts playing again. And speaking of Pratt, maybe that's the guy that you bring in now because this Leicester attack looks good. He scored. They can't bring him out. Well, they can. Anything can happen, but I don't see them bringing him out after he scored and they won. And they're top of the table right now. So I don't think you would mess with that formula. In the long run, rest of the season outlook, I still like Maddison better than Pratt, but it's fantasy's all about ebbs and flows, guys. Ride guys when they're high, and then when they start being low, don't have any, you don't need to have, you don't need to trust them. You don't need to have, you don't need to hold on to them forever. Okay. Don't be emotional and be like, oh man, this guy was good for me 6 weeks ago. Drop him. I think this is a case where you do that with Pratt. And you ride him while he's hot, and then you drop him when he's not. So here's a sneaky one, guys. A really, really sneaky one. Eric Peters didn't start, which was really disappointing because I like Eric Peters, and I have Eric Peters. But he did get subbed on when Robbie Brady got hurt, which is significant because Robbie Brady is a midfielder, and Peters went on and was playing left mid, but he's listed as a defender in fantasy. And no one is going to be going for Eric Peters because he scored no goal in this game, and he's sitting at -2 fantasy points on the season. So I think he is an absolutely sneaky pickup for a defender on a solid defending team. I know they shipped 4 this week, but they're usually solid defensively. And he's going to be playing midfield as a defender. And we always want to be looking out for those guys who are playing midfield and are listed as defenders because that's just extra points that we're getting. Jimmy Dunn scored. When this guy scored, I saw it and I was like, oh, I didn't know this was an actual player, Jimmy Dunn. But if I were to pick a team that Jimmy Dunn would be playing and scoring a header on, a hard-nosed center back scoring a header, I would pick Burnley. So typical of Burnley. If you rostered Jimmy Dunn last week, good for you, man. You're probably the only one in the world who rostered him. I wouldn't be buying him. I wouldn't be picking him up. But good for you if you rostered him. The Leicester fullbacks look great. Castagna he's been getting assists and goals. Justin's been getting assists and goals. It'll be interesting to see which one switches out for Pereira when Pereira does get fit, because Castagna's been playing on the right, but Justin usually plays on the right. But Justin's been playing on the left, but I think Castagna's slightly better than Justin. But naturally, Pereira would come back in and play on the right. So do they switch Castagna across? Do they keep Justin in? I'm not really sure about what's happening. But that's not something you need to worry about for a long time, guys, because Ricardo Pereira isn't a young player. He tore his ACL last year, so who knows how long he's going to be out for. So I'm riding James Justin and Castagna until the wheels fall off, as long as you can. Like I said, game of ebbs and flows, so ride those two guys while they're hot. And Pereira is awesome, but if they're doing really well, those fullbacks, I still think Pereira would win his spot back, but it's not guaranteed. and it's certainly not guaranteed when he's coming off a torn ACL. All right, Spurs 5-2 over the Saints. Southampton, another loss. A little surprising. I thought they were a sneaky value team this year. Still could be. It's 2 game weeks in. That was kind of silly to say. But Kane and Son, we were panicking about them last week. Why? Why are we panicking about them, guys? 4 goals for Son, 4 assists and a goal for Kane. Like, it's kind of funny how reactive we are as fantasy players, because we were worried about those guys, and it looks silly now. They also are signing Bale, so that front 3 is going to be fun to own a piece of that, even with Mourinho managing them, even with them being defensive. Like, you can only be so defensive when you have those 3 attacking, so those 3 are going to be fun to own for sure. Speaking of which, Bale coming in, Reguilón coming in. If you have Lucas Moura and you have Ben Davies, sell them. See if you can get anything and trade for them right now. Lucas is still a big name. He scored a hat-trick against Ajax 2 years ago. People remember that. Try and sell high on him. Get anything that you can for him. Maybe someone's really dumb in your league, or you say, oh, Bale's out for like 5 weeks, man. Lucas is still going to have a spot. Bale's injury prone. Do all that jazz that you need to throw at them to try and sell Lucas. But yeah, you want to be trading him right now. Ings scores goals. Scored a really nice first goal. Penalty was kind of garbage. Not the penalty he took, but the fact it was called a penalty. But yeah, he's looking like pretty much the player to own on Southampton. Obviously, there's not really anyone who's emerged yet. I still like Adams. He gets chances. He hasn't finished any yet, but I still want my strikers to be getting chances. He'll score eventually. Hopefully more than last season. I thought Alex McCarthy really struggled, which is interesting because I think he's a good goalie. But if Southampton are playing with that high of a back line, he looked really, really uncomfortable with that. And given the fact that they've kind of chopped and changed goalies in recent years, I don't think it's a bad idea to, if you have Garbage as your second goalie right now, go pick up Angus Gunn, and maybe you look like a genius next week. Probably not. They'll probably stick with McCarthy. But when goalies become available, it's a bit of a mad dash for those guys who don't have a second goalie. So if you have Garbage and you want to go get ahead of the game, and maybe you might as well if you have nothing else valuable. I think Gunn is not the worst idea as a pickup. Liverpool-Chelsea. Liverpool won 2-0. Kind of a boring second half after the penalty. They got their 2 quick goals, and then it was pretty comfortable from there. I know Chelsea had a penalty that they dove to get. Scumbags. They missed it anyway. Justice. Maybe we'll start with that. Actually, the Jorginho pen miss kind of sucks for him because that was pretty much his only path to value. We don't even know if he's going to be on Chelsea by the end of the window. But if you picked him up, that was your chance to get another Jorginho goal. I don't think it's going to be happening very often, Jorginho goals this year, especially now. When you play on a big team like this and you miss a pen, guys, I think that's it. I think you're back of the line. We got guys who are going to score type of thing. So that kind of sucks for Jorginho's value. We didn't really like him in the first place anyway, though. Kepa is obviously a drop. Mendy, the guy they just brought in, is a pickup. I think he's locked on fantasy draft right now. So you can't bring him in yet, but definitely rush to the waiver wire and pick him up next week when there's not such a hot group of new players coming in as free agents. He can be like your priority 1 or priority 2 next week if you don't have 2 good goalies already. So Kai Havertz has looked horrible in his first 2 Prem games. He scored a hat-trick in his League Cup game, though. That might be what he needs to get up off the ground. If there's someone in your league that owns Havertz, they probably know he got a hat-trick, but maybe they don't know. Maybe they just don't follow the League Cup at all, and you can say to them, man, Havertz looked horrible. You could take him off your hands for a Lucas Moura. Lucas, is playing up at Spurs. Maybe try and find the dumb guy in your league who owns Havertz, the guy who's quick to pull the trigger, like someone that I know in our league that could be quick to pull that trigger. Or, a guy like Townsend. Townsend, man, he's producing. Havertz looks bad. Those are the conversations you should be having with Havertz owners. Trying to sell him off for your last midfielder that's going to be on waivers in 3 weeks. That's the trade you want to make for Havertz. Those are the trades that get me going. Thiago Alcantara got subbed on at halftime, played well. In reality, that's the thing though. Is he a good reality player? Is he a good fantasy player? Because there's a big, being one doesn't mean you're the other, and vice versa. So I don't think he's going to be a very good fantasy player. I think that he is maybe you pick him up off waivers this week and then try and sell high on him. He sits very deep. He's a great, fantastic player, fantastic passer, not a fantastic fantasy player in my eyes. So I'm not super high on him. I think there's definitely better waiver pickups this week, and we'll talk about those in a little bit later. City 3-1 over Wolves. City looked really good. Obviously, their front four are all players you want to own. Pretty much their whole team is players you want to own, except for Rodrigo. So we'll start up front. Jesus with Aguero out is going to be a top 5 striker. Definitely a guy you want to own. This is his time. He's been flirting with it for years. With Aguero out, and Aguero's getting older, and he's coming into his prime more. This is definitely the guy you want to own just in terms of Man City strikers. He scored, so that's great. And then Foden, obviously you're owning Sterling as a potential top 5, probable top 5 fantasy player. You're obviously owning De Bruyne as the potential number 1 fantasy player, as he was probably drafted. And then Foden, if he's starting, that's good. I think Mahrez, he's coming off COVID. He probably hasn't trained much with the team. He was on the bench, which is interesting, which means it's kind of a positive because it means he doesn't have COVID anymore if he was on the bench. But the fact he didn't get on wasn't super great for his outlook. But I don't think they just say, okay, Mahrez, it's going to be 100% Foden this year. I still think that could be a timeshare and more of a 60-40 split for Mahrez. And even Sterling could rotate out, less so obviously. But I still think Mahrez has value and Foden has value, even though they won't be every week starters. Fernandinho as a defender, looks like he's going to be playing mid. Like we said, we love that. So you definitely want a piece of Fernandinho. He was a rock for them in midfield the last couple of years. So if he's getting defender points as being a midfield rock, then that's great. Roster him and reap the rewards. Hope he doesn't attack much, but the fact that he's a defender and he's playing as a midfielder and he's got looks like he's going to have a solid spot is good. Good for you, of course. John Stone started. I don't think he'll be starting for long. We got to realize that Laporte didn't start. City could bring in another center back. So I don't think Stones is a very strong pickup. Or if you drafted him, I don't think he's going to be a strong hold for very long. Maybe sell high on him. Maybe he's a guy you sell high on. Stones playing for City. Come get him. Get whatever you can out of him. If you can get any other player on a Big Six team that has a little more job security, do it. For Wolves, obviously, you don't need to talk about Jimenez. He's a great striker option, first-round striker. We know we're getting. I thought Daniel Pedence looked really good. He had a really nice assist on the goal. So he's obviously a player you should own. You want to own a lot of Wolves players too, guys. They're an attacking team. They got attacking fullbacks. They got solid defense. They got good forwards. The only guys I don't really love owning are the center mids, who are good players in reality, of course, but not great fantasy players because they don't get forward too much. And contrary to Chris Pike's popular theory, you don't want to just own guys who take corners because the amount of assists you're getting off corners is not sustainable fantasy value. Sorry, Pike. The thing with Podence is they just signed Semedo, who, by the way, is going to be a good pickup. I think he'll be very strong in this system. In the wingback system, you want to own Wolves wingbacks because they're obviously they have a history of performing. Johnny and Doherty, no need to look any further than that. The thing is, with their signing of Semedo, that probably pushes it down up to a wing spot. He does play right wing, and that's where Podence has been playing. So I would tend to think maybe Podence shifts over to the left and Neto drops out because Podence has looked better. but maybe they keep Neto on the left, and Pedence is their first attacker off the bench. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. I'm obviously still holding Pedence. Neto is meh. He hasn't really produced too much, but if he's starting, then I think he's still worth ownership as a fifth midfielder right now. Pedence has a higher upside, I believe. Villa 1-0 Sheffield. We didn't learn too much from this game, guys. It was pretty boring. Sheffield, it looks like they have a 4-man striker rotation. They started Sharp and McBurney last week. They started McGoldrick and this Burke guy this week. I still think the only one that I really want to own out of that crew is Ollie McBurney, because he's the best one and he's the one who scores the most goals. So hopefully they stop messing around and start playing him. Rotate the other position all you want. Those guys aren't going to be very popular or worth owning. I think hopefully they just play McBurney and then play whoever else with them. He's the one who scores for them. So he's the one that I still think is the most ownable, especially with forwards hard to come by, as we know. Lundstrom missed the pen. This isn't the Lundstrom of last year, guys. First of all, and most importantly, he's not listed as a defender who is playing basically attacking mid like he was last year. And again, you miss a pen, you're probably back the line. Like, especially if you're not a guy who has a history of scoring Premier League penalties, like I don't think Lundstrom does. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you just don't think he's going to be getting that opportunity again. And he's probably not ownable as just a random midfielder, even though he was a fantasy legend last year. Probably not ownable this year, especially after that pen miss. If you owned Ezri Konsa, he's the goal scorer this game, 15 points or whatever. Good for you. That's the guy you should be selling high. If there's any idiot in your league that wants to take a flyer on Konsa, because, oh man, scored a goal. Good for you if you owned him. He's obviously not a pickup, guys. If you want to stream him in against bad teams, good, great. I'm all for streaming defenders. But the minute they play a tough team, what's the point of rostering them that week? You can drop them and probably pick them back up, or pick some back up just as useful. Watkins started. Obviously, he's the guy you're going to own. He's a forward who plays, so that qualifies enough as a forward to own. He was a good player for Brentford. Could squeeze out some second forward value. I'd be more comfortable with him as my third forward. But given how tough it is to own forwards, I think he's a decent forward too as well. If you're looking for anyone else to own on these teams, guys, there's not much. Martinez, good goalie. Emiliano Martinez saved a pen. That's cool for Martinez owners, because you got to transfer to a worse team, but now he's starting every game. So that's fun. And he is a really good goalie. I don't love owning Aston Villa clean sheet players, but I mean, you got to own goalies, and you want goalies who start, and he's a goalie who starts. So that's cool enough. The one guy I would keep my eye on is Trezeguet, who started last season strong, or ended last season strongly. He wasn't anywhere to be seen at the start. He ended last season strongly. He could be the third guy. If he's a third guy in a consistent front three of Watkins and Grealish. Grealish, by the way, the only other player you want to own on Villa. Then maybe he ekes up some value if he can keep it going from last year. He's maybe a prospective ad as your fifth midfielder to see if he keeps playing. Maybe he scores. But again, you don't really want to be like, there's not going to be probably not going to be three Aston Villa attackers worth owning, guys. So it's not just like it's going to be tough for all three of those guys to have value, because they don't score as much goals, as many goals as they should. So I think that's it for the fantasy run through. There's your waiver ideas. Speaking of waivers, I think you should be going for, obviously, Bale, number one. I think Thiago as a number two, I like if you're going to try and flip him. Use his name value. Just came from Bayern Munich. This guy's sick. Try and sell high on him. I like that. I like Reguilon as a new transfer in. I don't think Semedo and Mendy are in the game yet, but I definitely like those guys as pickups. So just make sure that it would be awful malpractice if you just searched through your waivers, looked at the guys with the highest points, and completely forgot about guys transferring in. So don't forget about those guys transferring in, is what I'm trying to say. Don't just sort and, pick up your Konzas and whatever other defender scored that week and think, oh man, look at me. I'm a big boy now with Konza and all those guys who scored goals who are never going to score for the rest of the season. Don't look back, look forward. And with that, I think we're done for the week. Be active on waivers, guys. Most important part of fantasy. We'll see you guys next week with some more fantasy breakdown and, of course, our betting segments with the boys. Stay safe out there. Thank you very much for listening.